Hey, hey,
Hey, Cam.
we've got um Brandel's gonna make it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Um, so that works. My lighting is a little intense. Let me try to change that. How's your day?
It's been good. Went to did some errands and then went over to that bookstore in Culver City.
Oh, that awesome one.
Yeah, and yeah, then came back and just been, I don't know, kind of just doing like little tasks.
Nice. I love that bookstore.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Do you use a like an IRL planner besides a Moleskine? Do you use like an actual, or do you just put everything in a calendar, digital calendar?
I no, I just mostly just kind of try to keep track of things in my head, to be honest.
Trying to find, like, always on the look for a good format for a book. 'Cause, like, I'm not a fan of Moleskine, so I'm trying to find one like a book that I enjoy writing in.
Hmm. You're not a fan of moleskins.
No,
Yeah.
so I got to find something else that I enjoy. I think it's the paper. It's so slick.
Right. I mean, sometimes I just use like these index cards, and then
Yeah,
sometimes I'll use a binder clip just to kind of clip them to something.
I actually really like that because that's what I do. I just rip computer paper in half,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like if I can't fit it on half a sheet of paper, an 8.5 by 11, then it's gone too far.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I felt like the first meeting was really great to get things moving. I liked that jolt.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Sounds, I mean, I think it is moving, but I think, having that, I don't know, definitely hands-on groups. I think the hands-on stuff ends up helping.
Yeah, and I really like. I think you could sense I was anxious about finance stuff, and that you like directly addressed it, which was great. Not that I'm going to go like send a receipt for. I'm looking at. I was just watching the Valentino show, so I'm not going to send you a receipt for like $30,000 of fabric, but but it definitely that was where my hesitation was because I was like, we just haven't talked prototyping. Shockingly, and you've done enough of it, it just gets so pricey so quick. But we're not even close to that pricey level. I think I was just being worrisome for no reason, really.
Well, I mean, I get it. It's a good, sensitivity to have around it. But I feel like we just basically need to start moving forward.
Yeah,
I mean, not that we're not moving forward, but like that felt like that was a jolt for me to see that kind of sketched one, like Dre shared the Instagram.
yeah.
Oh, Randall's there. Sorry, I didn't see it. And I was like, I want my that. I
That felt
want
really
to.
Tom Sachs too.
They're probably because it was white and hand drawn.
Yeah. What's up, Brandel?
Uh, Not a lot other than I kind of raced home, so this will fade over time. It's just my bike helmet.
I'm loving the Memphis group shirt here.
Thank you. It was nice to be back in a fresh t-shirt. I traveled to New Zealand with just the clothes on my back, which was stylish, but got a little bit sort of weather worn.
I like that you use the word stylish. Awesome. I think it's just going to be the three of us. So thank you, Julian, for coming back, and Randall, thanks for taking the time after a long day. We can hop right into it because I know it's sort of evening time, but Randall, I'll catch you up a little bit. So we talked this morning about this is the focus is on the digital aspect of the chore coat. So this is really looking at the accessories. I'm going to share my screen again real quick, if I have access to that. And that will really just be to show you just a snapshot of the Miro board. So it's coming along. The Miro board has really come much further than I was expecting it to. So I'm really pumped with it. And in our call to this morning, what I realized is, and I probably will do this maybe for Friday's office hours, and we can get more people's thoughts on, where's my early morning notes? Just sort of walking everybody through again how we ended up with these digital accessories, because they didn't come out of thin air. This idea of the chore coat, we're not going to do endless permutations of the chore coat. That becomes, for a physical garment, just really expensive. So then adding these individual aspects for people to kind of coin their future dumpster diver, explorer, whatnot. The accessories really gave us that entry point into doing that. So this Miro board really was just an experiment. It actually just started off with Julian and I that one afternoon. But this really took off. I mean, people really seemed to get into it. So this morning's conversation was really, what do we do with these from that digital, like what platform and how do we execute this? And then you and I had talked about this earlier on a separate call. So this is just sort of like a snapshot of these accessories. So actually this is one of yours, this like inflatable. The one in the middle here is from an editor at a fashion magazine that I had get involved a little bit. This idea of like a disco ball sampler kit. Julian had this idea of silly string being used as like indicators to light the way or sort of mark your territory or show people where you've been. And I think all of this sort of made me, so this was the conversation you and I had, right? These emojis. This morning we talked about doing these in an AR filter that could be overlaid onto the coat as the first step. And then I think that the goal is then for that to possibly lead into there being another iteration of the digital that is more that resembles more of this. So I think the AR filter solves the problem of like the platform in which we use, because we can create the app we can create an app to do that through. But I still do kind of want I still envision these accessories having some sort of individual identity that exists somehow. So I wanted to kind of open up this conversation to you as well and get your thoughts on it.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for the rundown. I mean, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to have there to be sort of tangible components and for them to have sort of a digital dual life. It reminds me a lot of the RFID interchangeable block animals that Berg did. Julian, do you remember those? And they had some
I don't remember that one. What was that?
they had like they kind of played with some laser eye kind of Let me take a look for it. But I think it's a really apt mirror for this duality that we're talking about here. So I'm just going to take a look for it.
And we can even talk a little bit more about that duality, because I think, Grandel, one of the reasons why I really wanted to get your mind on this was because you seem to phrase this in a more eloquent way than I am. And I'm not sure what the language is, but I love the AR filter because that has this sort of like junk food moment of taking a selfie, right? Like if I'm in the coat and I have the app and I'm like taking my selfie in the mirror, I do that all the time. Like every time I go to an event, like when I was at the Valentino show last week, like the first thing I do is I take a photo of my outfit, right? And I love the idea of coming back from the future and taking a photo of my outfit, right? And then posting that. And not for nothing, but like influencers would have endless permutations of that, right? So not that we're looking for an influencer market, but I just think that whole concept is really cool. But on our call, you talked about this idea of like physical, digital space, taking up digital space. I'll just say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
That I think a profile photo doesn't do, right?
Yeah, and that's to do with like the mutual experience of any kind of digitally mediated kind of space. We all sort of exist as though we're the sole sort of inhabitant of a Wikipedia page, or to the extent that we're on Facebook or any other actual social medium. It's all filtered through it being our own exclusive view, and that like has its benefits in terms of being able to sort of comfortably manage visibility of things, but it gives rise to a really egocentric view of the way that we reside through our digital stuff, because it's never really considered to be shared. You know, like it's only on fairly rare and short occasions would we sort of hand somebody our phone, and for particularly like if at all, and only
Right.
for really limited actions like maybe putting in a number or looking at a photo, but we might even just hold it out for them to see. So like the taking up space is to do with sort of carving out a context in which like some kind of digital sort of intermediary is intrinsically meaningful. It can't be just like some sort of bored ape yacht club that doesn't have any other reason for being there, but that we nevertheless sort of reside within, and then we can feel each other's presence. I actually have started building a pretty interesting system for sort of mutual co-presence on arbitrary web pages. So you might be able to see each other's cursors or whatever without any significant kind of server infrastructure there. And I think that's really interesting. But the reality is that because we've gotten so used to seeing our own view, quite a lot of the time, those views are pretty incompatible. And so it's just sort of squaring that circle right now. But yeah, I think sort of figuring out and finding ways to highlight that disparity, recognize that we're not seeing the same thing, is an interesting thing to be playing with, in order to be able to claw back that mutual coexistence that sort of default residence inside a real space entails. Like when you're at a fashion show, it's like you're there in the same way the other people are there.
Right.
So yeah, like I think the central challenge of any of these, the notion of fashion is that like if it's for anybody but you on anything but your own absolute terms, then we need to reconcile like how are we to each other as well.
Right. Yeah, and then maybe I'm thinking about this in a way that's already been done, or I don't know, but you know, I'm going to attempt to tomorrow kind of, I'm not sure if pattern find here is the right way to put it, but you can bucket these things, tools being one of the obvious ones. Like Julian's, you're the really tool forward, right? Like your mindset clearly went to like functionality, tool based things. And then some people's were just like like one of Jed's, I just need more clarity on because I couldn't even figure out what he meant by it. Like which also feels kind of Jed, right? Like, but then there were some people who would put a tool in there and then be like, but I'm using it for something that when they explained it, like their concept of the future is again like so different from everybody else's. So I guess I'm sort of wondering if these accessories act like the memojis. Like if you see the disco ball sampling kit somewhere, you're like, oh my God, that's so and so. Or you want to collect it, or I don't want to say collect it, but there just seems like something about the lack of face, like the lack of a profile photo, and the ability for this to be like a, I don't know, like a sidekick item. Um, maybe I'm hoping it turns into something more than, maybe I'm asking it to be more than it is. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, like I think we've talked a little bit about. Have you heard about the website or the service hypothesis?
Mm-mm.
It's a website slash service slash company where they let you annotate arbitrarily the web and then join a circle of trust of people who have also annotated the web. So, in particular sort of subgroups, there might be information that's presented in a certain way, but it's actually quite opposite. So like there's a ton of places where there are, because there, in real life there really are concerned parents groups, but there are a lot of places where things are masquerading as concerned parents groups that are absolutely just anti-LGBTQ IA plus kind of communities,
Totally.
and separating those and having the opportunity to have some recognition that things are not exactly the way they look. There was a really very compelling but thankfully ill-fated greengrocers union website in New Zealand many years ago that was just put together by British American Tobacco to counter what was called plain packaging laws. They were saying this is going to hurt mom and dad corner stores and all of these things. And in fact, while it's plausibly true, one, maybe we're up for it, and two, it wasn't coming from mom and dad grocery stores. It was coming very much from British American Tobacco and Altria and people like that. And so people made a kind of a copy of that website, but with the actual sort of conversation pieces and the forum sort of functionality baked in that it was strongly implying that it should have. So that's I think really interesting in that it subverts the sort of the nominal space that a lot of digital things have. One sort of shortfall of that is that it's it's only for really explicit ways in which you want to annotate. It's only for really particular subgroups, and it's not mutually discoverable, but it's also not incidental. One of the things that is important about the real spaces that you and I inhabit, to the extent that we do, is that we don't have to sort of declare that our footsteps are a certain place on the ground, right? They're just there, and so hypothesis, but sort of for incidental mutual annotation, I think is an interesting way to pursue sort of how we're being in the space and what kind of marks we're leaving.
Yeah.
And to that end, somebody uses a website, somebody uses some kind of digital service, then there are incidental marks on it, some sort of impacts of their presence that they don't have to leave. They don't have to, diminish or alter significantly the way that website looks. It doesn't impair its functionality unless that's somehow like socially beneficial for people's understanding of it. But it's nevertheless like telltale signals and indicators that's what's gone on. That's how people have kind of cooperated in being in some kind of online experience together. We get very, very coarse-grained ones, like when a website is flooded with requests, and we're like, "I'm sorry, please try again later." But that's kind of a catastrophic indicator rather than one that's more subtly kind of representative of things before hitting that red line. But yeah, so like to that end, if there are characteristics that come from using the disco ball tester, disco ball sampler, or those indicators and things like that, then like that would be really cool. But yeah, in terms of the way in which that can be envisioned immediately, like most web developers are accustomed to calling all of the shots about how their websites look in a way that means that there's not a lot of room for other things to happen. The exceptions are things like Wikipedia and other super simple sites that can be modified and have been modified pretty well. But yeah, like I think there's fertile ground there, and it depends on how much you're willing to ask of people to buy into those, not buy in sort of financially, but conceptually to mutual infrastructural investment for being able to kind of feel each other. But it's something that I would be interested in myself, and probably sacrifice some aspect of performance and or privacy for if there's something that we can know about each other as a consequence.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I think we're going to move forward with this idea of AR filter.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like as Dre put it, the lowest common denominator of like sort of tech accessibility. And then I think he did a nice outline of like that to like the AR, like doing a chore coat in AR and then customizing the coat, then adding the accessories, finding a way to build a system to create accessories, either for people to do that themselves or for us to facilitate that. And then the next point from that would be, where do these accessories, is there a logical next step where these accessories exist past the AR filter, right? So like, do people want them to exist as an icon that they can take into another platform as a, identity marker, et cetera? Thoughts on that sort of timeline?
In terms of the feasibility of it, or yeah, I think that makes sense. I like AR filters in that they also have the ability to be sort of dynamically modified or updated based on digital information that people have available to them. So, yeah, like at absolute base, all you need is some kind of consistent sort of fiducial marker. You wouldn't even, I mean, we want a code, but if you just have a unique identifier, then you can re-render whatever pertains to that unique identifier at any time that it does. And so a certain component, a certain accessory can accumulate where or a patina, like like a high status patina of use as a consequence of it as well. So it has that ability to reflect after the fact that it's done things.
I like that phrase, a high status patina. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean so this all feels, I mean, my biggest, like, I don't want it to be is the Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT, right? And this all feels like it's not, like, this doesn't feel, even though we use that phrase like lowest common denominator, it's still not the Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT, right?
Yeah. But I think it's pretty, with even slightly good intentions, pretty easy to steer clear of, because like all of the use cases, like my brother is involved in what is it called, Fluff World Burrows, but all of the use cases,
you were
even
telling
there,
me about
still,
that.
they're still very much focused on sort of just like a digital rendition of the party stages at like a South by or a Coachella. It's like it's not for discovery or meeting. It's just kind of for presence and presentation of a fairly superficial kind. So I wouldn't be particularly worried about that if it's reflective of things that people actually do for their own reasons on the internet and with digital systems. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Is there any blind spots to this that we should be thinking about differently, or is there another form of digital that we're just missing?
Well, so I mean, AR right now, for the most part, means just phone-based or iPad or just like devices like that. But Oculus Quest Pro is a true AR device. I think some of the things coming out of Vive and things look like they will be able to do an increasingly good job of that. It remains to be seen how comfortable those kinds of things are on an enduring basis. But yeah, like having a context where people can kind of review and see things together like that would be pretty cool. One of the things that I was thinking about, and I don't know how well it is to reconcile it, but like if you know where, if you can geotag people in a thing, knowing that they're sort of out of your eye line, but sort of proximal enough to be able to kind of mutually discover is a pretty interesting thing to have overlaid. And so if there's like somebody in your who should be of interest and like within a couple 100 feet, having something that indicates sort of ambiently that they are is a way of sort of telling you about each other. There's like trust and safety issues related to how wide that kind of net goes. Companies like Apple are very anxious about making sure that nobody gets gets sort of found out or sniped because they're putting out information out there that they don't want. But I think there's still room for people to opt in and play with ideas like this, especially on a scale where it's it requires real stuff, but it's communities or practices that are small enough to be sort of ride that line of being sort of merely provocative, but also having some sort of indicator of use. So yeah, it is something to bear in mind. But like with apps, certainly on Apple systems, you've got test flight and other things to be able to distribute an app, even if it can't get approved, maybe especially if it can't get approved to a few hundred people. And so that's more than enough to demonstrate like what this is and to be able to kind of talk about what kind of opportunities flow from thinking about technology and connection and self and presence in this way. So yeah.
Yeah, I keep going back to this. I kept thinking this morning about, it's Paris Fashion. It's not Paris Fashion Week, it's Paris Haute Couture Week. And I keep thinking about being there in the chore coat, but if my accessories were visible, I could indicate or I could signal, like, there's something that I always love the secrecy, like the Paul Smith style stuff, right? Like there's, you flip the tie around, there's like a little hidden thing, or there's a cuff. There's something about the chore coat that the element of secrecy that I've always resonated with the chore coat. And I feel like the accessories, this idea of people wearing this seemingly simple object in a world and going off and being part of this, bless you, this lab. And then if somebody can see that I have these accessories on, and then they can, DM me and be like, oh, I saw you with, that accessory and I saw you with this, or even, and then I think about it from a place of like community or niche building, right? Like even within a Paris Fashion Week, there's so many people you want to avoid, or so many people you want to connect with specifically, right? And like, even in these tech environments, right? Like you want to avoid those people, you want to connect with these people. And, from like a queer space too, right? Like these coats could have ways of, oh, you're in fashion and you're queer, or you're trans, or you're this, or you're in tech. Like so you don't end up in a sea of influencers trying to get clicks on their photo, right? You end up connecting with like, there's a way for me to be in Paris and I see if there's somebody who is another NFL futurist there and I don't know them, like there's like that moment of identity marking that I find really cool about potential here. I'm not saying that that's my goal for this right now, but I find that application or potential for this to be really interesting.
Yeah, no, that's really really exciting, and reminds me of the projector based AR stuff that I've been jamming on for a while. Is the idea that augmentation doesn't have to be just of your own eyes, of your own view.
Right.
If you have a substrate of sort of digitally mediated stuff, right, then every light becomes programmable. Every hue in an entire space becomes something that it has to be negotiated socially between people and between devices for different uses and contexts. But you could, like, for example, if you have a camera, right, and it has a relatively short shutter speed, and you have pulse width modulation of all of your lights in a space, if you can synchronize those things right well enough, then you could actually take a photo of just one person, whereas to the human eye, it actually looks like everybody's illuminated. So, or you could have it so that there's a slight hue shift of all of the lights as one person walks past, because they've sort of decided that that's something that they want to have happen, and the sort of the technical substrate of the entire environment allows that to occur. You'd have to have voting systems for what's allowed to happen and who gets to see and things like that. But like, I think that that sort of augmentation or a highlighting of specific characteristics or moments and having them human readable or machine readable or really specific machine readable is really exciting. Like if you have, I think I have drawn a diagram for this. I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but like if you just get a whole bunch of like individually programmable LEDs, like in a big long strip, you just tangle it up and throw it on the ground, then there's no inherent structure to it. But if you take a picture of it from an angle, any angle, it doesn't matter, then you can start to piece apart like which pixels correspond to which spatial location, and you'll be able to create an image from that position. It may look like garbage from any other position, but you can then recalibrate for those other views. And so you can start to make things that are sort of selectively legible, but then like made out of the infrastructure around you, so that you can play with like the digital impact of physical things, physical markers, and I think
that's what I think is so
there.
fascinating about the camera usage of it. It's like the happy accident of turning that physical into this thing. And I guess like when you're talking about like fluff world, like starting with moments, like whether it's Coachella or Fashion Week or whatever that moment is, these are spaces that, yes, you're sort of going into a selective space, right? Like Coachella is a selected space of people going for a purpose, but even within that space, there's so many different types of people going into that space, right? So it's sort of kind of a great way to start with that selective, because you could opt in a way that's safe, right? Like I'm more apt to opt in when I'm already in a safe space, or what I consider a safe space, right? Rather than just being like willy-nilly every day, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen what sort of digital mediations exist at a place like Coachella, but one of the challenges a lot of people have is they'll just create a sort of standalone digital mirror of a tangible world event, and I think that there needs to be some sort of interoperable mediation where the two affect each other. One can't be just a second class citizen to the other. And so I would be really curious as to how people have come up with truly digitally mediated physical events and spaces. And to that end, I would really love to see. A friend of mine just wound up his microbrewery and is going to get back into creative technology. I'd love to see him try this. It's just like if you have a whole venue and you have the ability for people to kind of vote on their ambient light color and things like that, then you'd end up with this natural intermingling of things that have sort of emergent consequences that are subtle but identifiable. And I think something special would come out of that. If Coachella already does that, then I'd love to see it. But like just so where something about somebody being has an impact on the way that the environment works.
Yeah, I think there's something about this. I mean, I'm acknowledging the departure from like our immediate digital accessory here. But like I'm also trying to like, I like to operate on two modes where there's sort of the like the fantastical, this is where I'm sort of thinking. And then I sometimes, it's like if I'm working backwards and forwards, somehow I meet in the middle a little bit. And that's sort of how I'm thinking about this, right? Like because I was even saying today, like my ultimate, I would love for there to be this moment of like, you're in the crowd and you're walking out of Fashion Week or Coachella or whatever, and somebody's got their phone out because we all have our phones, and you can just like, swipe it across the space, and then all of a sudden, oh, like, Preesh, who's right behind me right now, is like in her little ball on my shoulder, in her little cat sidecar on my chore coat, and then I'm at the cafe, you know, next to the Dior store, and someone comes up and is like, "Oh, I saw you and Preesh at the Valentino show earlier," right? And it's like, "Oh, so you're using language that signifies to me that you have this code of NFL futuristic language," right? So like then there's that seamlessness of it I find within the crowd to be really fascinating, right? And so then all of a sudden you have this added layer of um, which we already do through the coding of like following each other on Instagram, right? Like when I see somebody at the gym and they're like, "Oh, your trip home seemed really cool," and you're like, "I have not talked to you about that," right? Like that first couple of conversations, right, freak people out, and now it's so commonplace to be like to know information and talk freely about it, even though you've never had that conversation. So I think this is the next step of like having coded elected spaces where you are part of groups, and I feel like the futures group is a really easy one to kind of, it's not threatening, right? It's very optimistic. We sort of created this space where people who are really pessimistic about the future, not that they're not welcome, but like they don't find their niche here as well, right? They don't find their footing. So there's a little bit of like you know we're not a parenting group from, or like there's a really good launch pad for this in many ways. So I'm seeing that as sort of like this endpoint. Getting there with the AR filter, then I think it's got to be accessible so it's doable, both from our standpoint and sort of somebody who wants to do it, right? Like so they don't have to take out their phone and have $500 worth of equipment be on their phone to do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking back to sort of, like you said, like the function of this call being digital accessories for the core shortcode. I think if you have the idea of environments that can be altered by the presence of digital accessories, then that could be like lighting, air conditioning, any other sort of thing, like scent, if you have that. And Matter, like the HomeKit, sort of open source sort of consortium of HomeKit and all of the other things that like Apple and Google have signed on to, is a way of being able to kind of interact with those things. Like I said before, right now that all looks super, explicit. So like this is my garage door, and you just tap it to open and close it. And where's my lounge light? You have these really specific things where it's like, okay, which light do you want to change? How do you want to change it? But it's sort of winner take all. My wife has the same app on her phone, and if we don't fight with it, but if we press them, then the system wouldn't fight. It wouldn't reconcile those. So it wouldn't. So it also means that there's no notion of actual sort of broader negotiation. Like it was interesting thinking about like when you're talking about your trip home conversation, the fact that like Instagram, it's sort of 0-1 in terms of whether you see it or not. You don't like, people scroll past and they either really fixate and look at it or not. But it's not the same as if you're walking down a street and you sort of incidentally see all of this, and you may talk to that one person. It's looking past somebody literally single file vertically rather than horizontally, but kind of more like a place lineup. Hopefully less sinister. But this is kind of more being able to much more incidentally like come across all of those things, and potentially for people's influence on spaces to be more incidental as well. I feel like those two things are sort of separate but very important as components of experience and like of other things and influence over things.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure. I mean, we could literally have weeks of conversation on like the sinister or the opt-in, opt-out, why you would, why you wouldn't. But
Yeah,
when we talk about it from that linear or that scrolling, I always find it so fascinating when people are like hesitant. They're like, I would never put information on. I have a lot of lawyers in my family. Well, they're lobbyists, I should say, but they've all gone to law school and they're all like, I would never put anything when Facebook first came out, they're like, I would never put anything online. And now all of them are super involved on Facebook, right? Like I am not on Facebook, right? For that very reason. But it's it's so funny how people become desensitized. So whenever someone's like, I would never do that, I'm like, so you're going to be doing it. And that idea of like, I would never leave this swipe method, or I would never leave the confines of this protected phone. And that idea of handing someone's phone is so taboo, to give your phone over to somebody else or to touch someone else's phone. But I fully believe in that world of like walking down the street and just, I don't think you're going to be inundated with it because that wouldn't make any sense. But I think you can electively opt into different things or exist in a world where you've allowed certain aspects to come to you or not, much like a community. Like my Instagram is so programmed to my likes, right? Or like to what I am naturally drawn to. So yeah, I think that these accessories feel like these Easter eggs into that world. Like I like the idea that they're right now, like if they act as like a glitchy filter, that's totally cool. I love the idea that they're like an Easter egg into this futuristic futures world of where I kind of want that to go, if that makes sense.
yeah,
I just want to make sure that like this future version of what I'm thinking of isn't totally off base, because as we pare it back, I want that to make sense. If that, you know what I mean?
totally, totally.
Cool. That was awesome. I don't really, yeah, I
Yeah,
love conversations like this. I'll walk away in 5 minutes and be like, what the hell did we just say? But this did seem to make sense.
yeah, I think so. I've got some things that I want to talk to some folks about. I really want to learn more about Matter, this this home automation system, because I like that's something that I've kind of bumped into a few times. It's just like I really want to influence some of these things a little more incidentally, and
Yeah.
I think that's going to open up a lot of people's perspectives on the way we might be in spaces and the reasons why we might augment some of these kinds of capabilities and services. Because right now they're one like they're all such a I want to say like patriarchal power fantasy, like HomeKit, all of these kinds of things. They're all about like surveil, control, contain, all this kind of stuff. And it's just like,
Yep.
It's
that's
still
not
the
really what I do at
Ubicon
my
fan,
house.
it's still the Ubicon fantasy. Like this is all the
Yeah,
fantasy,
yeah.
like of all those, wonderful, lovely, earnest CS professors from back in the early Ubicon days. I was talking about with someone the other day.
What's
Um,
that? Ubicon.
Ubicomp, it was well, I mean I haven't heard much, I mean, but I've been out of the loop, but it was ubiquitous computing was the shorthand for a, I would say fairly interdisciplinary, mostly computer science and electrical engineering. There's a little bit of social science oriented, um, a research and development movement, I guess, in academia that very quickly, became also commercial, and we're kind of in the variously, the wacky, the, the wacky result of all that, including
Yeah.
Mary yelling at the television saying, "Siri, Siri." and it wasn't listening. I said, Alexa, and then Alexa, as she's done right now,
Ding.
like those things, that's what everyone's trying, people were trying to figure out, but very earnestly. There was, Kemp, you might actually enjoy it. There's a paper, it's very readable. So it's not technical. Not that you couldn't read anything technical, but it's actually, I think it might resonate with you. Called, God, what was it? Paul Dersh and Genevieve Bell. Um, and
Dividing a Digital Future.
that was, I think, the book that they did.
Okay,
Um,
you mentioned it in manual. I don't remember. I want to go through the whole bibliography and pull it out so that I have it all in a single virtual space.
yeah, here it is. Yesterday's Tomorrow's Notes on Ubiquitous Computing's Dominant Vision. Can you even download a PDF, or are they going to make me sign up something? Oh, here it is. I'll send through the link.
Right.
And
Yeah, I mean, it's great.
there was a podcast. Had a chat with Genevieve in a podcast episode, which was, I think, for a while, was like the most popular podcast episode.
That one's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun talking to her.
Yeah, the patriarchy comment I think is so, because whenever I am looking at this, I mean, if it's home related, it's always about protection and guarding and call to arms, right? Like you can't be caught with your pants down. You've got this whatever that protects your, I mean, that, and it's so fear and firearm based.
Yeah, but I don't think it's that by necessity. I think like socially negotiated is a really interesting sort of paradigm. That's one of the things that like Berg was trying with Little Printer, and people were like, "That's just a fax machine." But I think some of the inversion of control was really, really, really exciting in terms of saying like, "Here's a thing that you," and it is what a phone is, or like a landline for the most part, is something that you sort of largely provide for the benefit of other people who want to relate to you. But it's a very different sort of model than when you're sort of claiming that you can command and control and protect all of your assets in the same way that like people flock to in terms of general sort of home messaging and abstract.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the home space feels like a really interesting. Cool. This was really helpful. Helpful to kind of get like a lay of the land in my own mind of where this is going. I hope it doesn't, I feel like the light is on right now. And I feel like the second I turn off the Zoom, it's going to go off.
Well,
you know that feeling?
we recorded it so you could just like listen to the audio and let it kind of marinate your vascularized head meat.
What is it about, like, even when you posted that photo today of like the first call, there's something about seeing yourself from before that I was like, yes, that happened. There's something so satisfying about that.
Yeah, memory, like the best memories are inactive. It's all about sort of memory as a process rather than as an object, I think.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So I think on Friday, I'm going to try to just give the group in general, it feels like the Friday meetings have really, the office hours have gotten big and chatty, and I love it. So I'm going to try to chime in with a little bit of like update on where we're all at with both physical and digital. And then open it up for anybody else.
Just muscle in there, or just raise your hand and just stop everyone.
Yeah. No, I feel comfortable. I wanted to let the skateboard thing happen last week because I felt like people were jamming on it. But yeah, and then Brandon, we're just gonna move. We talked this morning too. We're gonna move forward. We're just making the physical coat next week. So, but we'll update
Cool.
that. Yeah. So cool. So I'll do a little update on Friday, and then other than that, I think we're in a good place. I'll probably ask to do another digital call either next week, and get moving on actually making some of these things. Like doing the AR filter. So maybe rope in Dre and see how we go about doing that. If we can be physically making and digitally making at the same time, I feel like we'd be cooking with gas.
Yeah. So I mean, on a purely mechanical level, just having things that you can sort of semi-uniquely recognize. Right now, the most obvious example of that is QR codes, but feel free to use anything but QR codes as well, as long as people can kind of say, I can recognize this. So like Apple has these things called, what did we call them? They're circular. They're a little nicer, but yeah, anything that's sort of uniquely identifiable from a machine vision system has the ability to be able to kind of locate and then also orient things.
Yeah.
So if you want to have a thing on a shoulder, knowing where the shoulder is helps a lot. Aspects of other machine vision for just human figures and things like that are getting pretty good, so you can attach those things as well. But yeah, the more data there, the better. But it also depends on how really you want it. If you just want to sort of like put out concepts, then that works. But having some relationship to what's achievable that doesn't hurt terribly either.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll just start moving forward, and then I think to kind of what you were saying earlier, Julian, we'll course correct as we go, but I think we do need to get moving on the making. I love the idea of them working in tandem, because it's like, if we're making the AR filter and then we're like, whoa, the code has to do this, and we're making it in this Muslim, they can shift the code, so I feel like that's really good. Cool. Any other thoughts?
Cool. No, I'm really excited by it. I'm gonna, like I said, try to find more about this home stuff and see if I can get a point of like a proof of concept of lights just by presence, stuff like that. Think about what's knowable there, because there's just so much. Once it gets easier for other people to imagine.
I love the idea of like, I get excited about living in the possible near future. I love the idea of like time traveling conceptually to the near future, coming back to the future that these things would exist in, to get really heady. So it gets me like pumped, And then I walk away, I'm like, this is so cool. And my friends are like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, doesn't it? So awesome, guys. Well, thank you for taking time. I'll see you guys on Friday.
Cool.
Awesome. Bye, y'all.
That's
Thanks, Julian. Thanks, Ken.